Hello, and thank you for viewing the Melanoma Research Foundation's webinar, When a Parent Has Cancer. My name is Shelby Monier, Director of Education at the Melanoma Research Foundation. I'd now like to introduce our speaker, Ms. Jean Hartford Todd. Jean has been a child life specialist at Duke University Health System for 34 years. She currently works with the adult cancer patients at Duke Cancer Patient Support Program, working related to the needs of children and teens in the family and providing support for those patients. Please take a moment to read Jean's full bio on the left-hand side of your screen. Jean, I'd like to thank you for being here and supporting on this very important topic.
Thank you very much, Shelby. I'm glad to be here. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this talk. In my work at the Duke Cancer Center with patients who have young children and teens, I often hear patients say, I could do this. I could cope with having the cancer if it wasn't for my children. And they talk about how difficult it is to know how to explain cancer and treatments and side effects to their children, and to talk about the many emotions that come with those discussions. So the first thing I'd like to look at are the barriers that make it difficult for parents to talk to our children about cancer and treatments. Many of these are very obvious. Some that I'll talk about in a little more detail might not make sense as you read them on the screen. I know very many patients are worried that they will cry in front of their children when talking about a cancer diagnosis. And then that leads to some of the next worries, that the children will be afraid, that kids are too young to worry like this, that they won't be able to understand the conversation. Some patients conversely say, hey, they don't even notice what's going on. They're just in their own world. With all of these things, I would like to help families understand that children, like adults, experience the full range of emotions when something difficult is going on. And our goal is not to prevent them from experiencing those feelings, but to support them as they experience those feelings. Now, I don't know any child or teen that likes to see their parent cry. Probably even as adults, we don't like to see our parents cry. But I will say that if we can share some tears in a controlled way, then we teach our children that it is okay to express sadness with others, especially to express that sadness with those we love. And children can learn that, hey, adults cry too. This is a part of life. And they can learn to manage their worries and their fears with the support of the parent. And we'll talk more about some of these things later. For folks who think that the kids don't even notice, that they're just in their own world, some kids do seem that way, absolutely. And some kids are less impacted and other kids more impacted by a cancer diagnosis. But I do think we need to assume that all of the children are noticing something, and maybe more than they're even letting on. Where it says parents need permission, sometimes because of scrutiny from others. I do work with folks who say, yeah, well, I was going to tell my kids I have cancer, but then this person at a school that I work with said, oh my gosh, you're not going to tell them you have cancer, are you? And suddenly they begin second guessing themselves. And so as a professional, I try to encourage parents, yes, please do talk to your children about cancer. And it is okay to have these conversations, and not just okay, but even healthy and positive. Protection of the child versus protection of the self is something we all do, right? When we have young children, we know that once we tell them something, whether it's news about a cancer diagnosis or that we're going to get an ice cream, that suddenly the child is in control of that information, and they can talk to us about it as often as they want, whenever they want. They will ask questions, and suddenly that control that we had around talking about cancer when I feel like I can talk about cancer is lost. And the child suddenly drives some of those conversations. And so sometimes as parents we think, oh, well, I don't want to tell my child because they might worry, but we're also protecting ourselves and trying to understandably regain some of that control around when we talk about cancer and how we talk about cancer and where we talk about cancer. Protection of the youngest is something I have encountered again and again and again, and it's interesting that families, and I'm going to include myself when I say families because I have two kids, one older and one younger, we often think about talking to our older children more frequently and in more detail than we do our younger children, and it doesn't matter how old our youngest and oldest children are. One day I met a family, and this was many years ago, they had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they said, well, we've told the 4-year-old that I have cancer, that I'm going to take medicine, that my hair will fall out, but we haven't told the 2-year-old because, she's just too young. And then I literally went to the next room, and they said, well, our kids are 8 and 10, and we've told the 10-year-old everything. They know about the cancer, but, our 8-year-old is young, and she knows I'm sick, but we haven't really used any other words. And then this is a true story. I went to another room, and those children were, I want to say, 12 and 14, and they said, well, we've told the 14-year-old everything, but the 12-year-old is young. And all of a sudden, the light bulb went off that we as parents protect our youngest children, and it's in large part, I think, because we compare them to their older siblings. And we don't think about what can my child manage. We think about how they compare to the older sibling. And so I would just encourage you to be thinking about literally the how your younger child can talk about other topics, how much detail you share, are they information seekers, and try to use some of the same types of conversations as you would do about something that is less, worrisome and threatening than the cancer conversations are, because I think we know that they can tolerate these conversations. It is so easy as parents to think that if I talk about cancer, I only will then have to talk about death. And we just have that little equal sign in our minds between cancer and death. And I understand why we do that, but I also know that there are many helpful and productive and important conversations that we can have about cancer that don't include conversations about death. And so as we look at future slides, you'll see some of the content in those conversations and how we can give kids information that they need. And yes, I do have some slides that address the question of death, and I hope the ideas I have for sharing that information with your kids will be comfortable for you. Sometimes I hear from parents, especially early when the diagnosis has just been made, that they themselves don't understand the illness well enough to explain it to their kids. They haven't had a time to do the research. They haven't gotten all the information from their doctor. They don't quite yet know the treatment plan. And yet kids are noticing that something's going on. And so trying to find ways to have conversations step by step. And I see myself as an interpreter almost, where I take technical medical information or difficult medical information and simplify it for younger children. And so you'll see that in some of the later slides. And then I think one of the biggest barriers for us as parents is trying to find the words. We know the word cancer, but how do you explain that to a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old? And again, I hope some of the information in the future slides helps with that. So to talk to children and teens about cancer. One of my favorite quotes by Rudolf Dreikurs, an Austrian psychiatrist, is, "Children are keen observers, but poor interpreters." So they observe, they pick up on the emotional climate in the family, more people dropping by to visit, more phone calls where a parent walks in the other room and closes the door, and they don't know how to make sense of that. So that first bullet, children need help understanding their world. If they're hearing things and they're observing things, they need information to help them make sense of what is going on. I always say if a child's primary emotion is confusion, how can they even begin to sort of process what their other feelings are, worry or sadness or happiness or relief. So, my goal is to help families reduce the confusion that kids experience. Children will often make up their own reasons for events if they're not told the truth. And often their made-up stories are more confusing and more frightening than the reality. And I know it's easy to think, what could be more frightening than telling them that I have cancer? But kids have a way of twisting and turning that and thinking, maybe the cancer is my fault. Maybe my parent is going to die tomorrow. Maybe they're going to leave and not come back. And so, yes, talking about cancer is difficult and does elicit, fears and worries, but it is often calming to the kids to know the real information rather than living with their fantasies. The grocery store encounter is one where, you're out in public with your kids somewhere, you're at the grocery store or a park, and somebody just charges up to you and says, "Oh my gosh, I heard you have cancer. How are you? My uncle had the same kind of cancer," and they go on and tell their uncle's often difficult story, and your kids are standing right there. So I think if kids are going to hear about a cancer diagnosis, and my belief is they will hear about a cancer diagnosis, I would rather that you, the parent, have control over when they hear it, how they hear it, who tells them, and where you tell them. So there's privacy for them. And by talking to your kids about cancer, you gain control of those things. And you don't give that control up to someone who might just approach you out in public. And then one of the most important things is we want our kids to trust us. And if they sense that you are telling them the truth about what is going on in the family, the trust strengthens. But if they feel like there's something they're not being told, they worry and they second guess, and they sometimes have less trust in parents because they think there are secrets. So one of the last bullet on the first slide talked about not having the words, not knowing how to say, explain to a very young child that you have cancer, or how much do you tell a teen. So for younger children, I suggest something along the lines of, I have a spot of sickness in my body that doesn't belong there. We can't see the spot with our eyes, but the doctors can see it when they did some special x-rays and did some tests. The spot of sickness is called cancer. If you hear us saying cancer, you will know that we're talking about that spot of sickness. Now, sometimes the very young children are just like, oh, okay, especially, the preschoolers. And they just go about their business, but you've told them, and they have that language, and they can use that language. For older teens, it's a similar conversation, but assuming that you believe they already know the word cancer, and you can introduce the word melanoma and just explain that melanoma refers to the type of cells in the body that become cancerous. And then some kids and teens want more detail. And so the next slide talks about cells and cell division and how healthy cells divide and how that changes when cells become cancerous. And older kids could just read this themselves, or you could explain it to them. But having this concrete understanding of what cancer is, rather than just this vague notion that it's a sickness, can really help kids better understand treatments, side effects, and many of the other things that will follow. And that's a detailed slide, so you can read that on your own. In addition to talking about cancer and what cancer is, giving your children and teens a base of information about treatments. For some folks, that's wait and watch, that the doctors, you're going to go back for checkups and they're going to watch. With the ocular melanoma, it might be that you just go for frequent checkups. They watch to see if it's going to start growing, and you might just have this a watchful waiting period. But if surgery is required, there are different levels of surgery. This first paragraph refers to a smaller surgery where you can explain that the doctors will remove the spot of cancer and some of the area or tissue around the cancer, and that if there are any small pieces of cancer left behind, because sometimes that happens, then you will get additional treatments. And I want to point out that there is a handout that's available to you where you can use bubbles, blowing bubbles with your children as a way to teach them about cancer treatments. And it is very silly, it's very messy, so please let them do it with a lot of towels down or outdoors so that you don't have to say, no, don't make a mess, that they can just experiment with this and have fun. But it's a very detailed, almost like a lesson plan, and it's a great way to teach them about surgery, big surgery, little surgery. The next paragraph does talk about a more extensive surgery that would potentially change a parent's appearance more. And using the bubbles, you can actually let them play out some of this and get a better and more concrete understanding of what you will do. And then there's a short paragraph about radiation. I always say, so when I work with kids directly, I always say, do you know that we have an invisible medicine at the hospital? And their eyes get really big, and I talk about radiation and that it's an invisible ray and it can destroy cancer cells. And the kids who are into science and science fiction like that. And then again, using the bubbles or just using words for the older kids, you can talk about chemotherapy, explain how you will get the chemotherapy, whether it will be a IV treatment, a pill you'll take at home, and then the same with the immunotherapy, that it triggers the body's fighter cells to recognize the cancer and work even harder to destroy them. When I think about treatments, and all of these treatments, I tried to give you some language to use, but one thing that's important to share with your child is how will this impact their daily life? If your treatment is a pill that you take, that's not such a big deal. If you're not going to go to the hospital for several hours to get an IV treatment, it might not impact them on a daily basis as much. And I'm not talking about side effects here, which I know we'll talk about in a moment. I'm really talking about how you get your treatment. So think about what your kids will notice and how it will impact their schedule. As far as how kids might respond when they hear that a parent has cancer, I would say in a way that the sky's the limit. There's a wide range of reactions that I consider to be normal and healthy. And one is really the child who doesn't show any reaction at all. They just become very silent. Now, you know if this is typically how your child responds or if this is something new, but I encourage you, if your child gets very silent and withdrawn, to scale back on the details a little, tell them just what they need to know to sort of get out that you have a sickness called cancer and that you'll get more medicines for it in the future. And then it's okay to pause and say, do you have any questions? And then say, well, I'm going to check back with you later tonight and we can talk some more. Or maybe I'm going to check back with you tomorrow, depending on if you think they'll be able to sleep and how distressed they'll be. But some children need to process information in very small amounts, and you can help them do that. Some kids are going to say to you, I already knew that. You know, they've heard the conversations, they've listened in when you've been on the phone, and just explore with them, how did you hear this news? And wonder if the information how they've understood the information they've heard is accurate, or if they have misunderstandings, and then clarify those misunderstandings. And please don't punish them if they're eavesdropping. You know, kids eavesdrop because they're scared, and you know, it's easy as a parent to think, oh, that's not polite, and you shouldn't do that. But in this context, I would just encourage them to come directly to you to get information, so that the information they get is presented in a way they can understand. Other children who learn about a parent's cancer will have many medical questions. They will want to know a lot of details and will ask question after question. If you know the answers to these questions, just go ahead and answer them. If you don't know the answer, you can actually write down the questions and let your child know that either the next time you go to the doctor or the next time you message your doctor, that you can ask that question and get an answer for them. And it's also always fine to just say, I don't know, or we don't know. You know, there might not be an answer to a specific question, and it's really okay just to say, you know, I don't think any of us know that right now. If your child becomes very upset when they find out about the cancer diagnosis or at any point as you're sharing information, just pause the conversation, hug them and hold them. Acknowledge that this is hard for everyone in your family. As you're acknowledging these difficult feelings, also talk to them about what the doctors will do to treat your cancer, and talk about your family support community, whether that's extended family, friends, people at school, people at church. We're not trying to push down their expression of feelings. They do have these feelings and they need to express them. But what we're trying to do is build a support under them and hold them up while they do have these feelings. So think of it as a way to help your child develop coping skills to deal with this difficult situation and situations that will come up in their entire lifetime. And let your child know that it is okay to have a lot of feelings about cancer. Common questions that children have. One is, how did you get the cancer? One honest answer for many cancers is we don't know. We don't know what makes a cancer start growing in one person's body. Sometimes there are risk factors that we know are there, but a lot of times when kids ask this question, they are actually wondering, did the parent do something wrong, or did I do something wrong? Children developmentally are quite egocentric, and they think everything is about them, including the cancer diagnosis. Now, some professionals will tell you just sit the child down and say, hey, this isn't your fault. I tend to be a middle-of-the-road person, and I think, well, that's great for the child who's worried, but what about the child who hasn't thought about that? You know, do I want to introduce a worry? So I do cover this, but I try to include the child in a group of people. This cancer is no one's fault. It's not my fault. It's not Dad's fault. It's not Grandma's fault. It is not your fault. No one made this cancer start growing. So you are addressing that, but in a mix of people. Kids wonder if cancer is catching. Can they catch cancer from a parent or a loved one? And explain to them that you did not catch your cancer from anyone else. That cancer is not a germ and it's not contagious and nobody can catch it from you. Be aware that some kids, and I'm talking about kids who are 10, 11, 12, old enough to hear cancer is not contagious and understand that, they sometimes still have secret worries. And they sometimes still need reassurance around this issue, even if it seems like intellectually they grasp the concept. On some level, some of these kids do actually worry that cancer is somehow can be transmitted from one person to another. And then the most difficult question that I referenced early in the talk, and one thing that makes talking about cancer so very difficult, is that question of, are you going to die? So no matter what kind of cancer a parent has, even if it's a cancer that we expect it'll be a procedure in the dermatologist's office and, you know, the melanoma will be removed and you likely won't need any other treatment, you can still say, because kids hear this in the news and public, cancer can be a serious illness and some people do die from cancer, but other people who have cancer live years and years and even a whole lifetime. I am not dying now. I'm taking my medicines. I'm working hard with my doctors. And I'm always going to tell you the truth about how my checkups go and how things are going. If you're ever worried, you can ask me questions and I will tell you what I know. So what you do is you just acknowledge that some people die from cancer, but many, many people don't die from cancer, and that you're working with your doctor, you've had your surgery, whatever is true for your case, and that you would never keep it a secret if you ever had news about that. Some cancers are more advanced, and so ideas for how you can answer this question if you have a cancer that is more advanced is to say sometimes a cancer is a sickness that the medicines can make go all the way away, but we know that other cancers a person has and will have for the rest of their life. My doctor has realized that I will likely have this cancer for the rest of my life, and I will always need to take medicine for it. So with this answer, you're helping the child understand this isn't going to go away. I always will need some type of treatment for it, but you can also help them understand that you're not dying. People can live with cancer for a long time, even when it has progressed. Another idea, if kids continue to ask questions, is to say everybody does die from something one day, and that it is possible or likely that cancer is what I will die from one day. We don't expect that to happen soon. For now, the doctors are going to help me live as long as I can, feeling as well as I can. Now, if you have a cancer that is advanced, I would encourage you to consider whether it would help your family to have a mental health professional, a therapist, a counselor, a social worker from your hospital. Actually work with your family around some of these conversations and, helping you better understand the timing of the conversations and when to give additional information to your children. So what helps in general? One thing we've talked about throughout this presentation is communicating with your kids about cancer, giving them information they need to help them understand what they will be seeing, what they will be hearing related to the cancer and treatments, how their daily lives will be impacted, what will change in the family. Also prepare them in advance for changes that will occur regarding your appearance or how you will feel. And this is important when we think about side effects from treatment. Often kids will see a parent who's feeling very, very tired, extremely tired from cancer treatments. And the child will actually wonder, is my parent getting very sick? Are they dying? And all the adults are saying, wow, the doctor told me this would really make me tired, and it is. And so communicating with your kids about some of the side effects they will actually observe and see can help them better understand what is and what isn't happening. One thing to think about is some kids feel comforted when they have a lot of medical information. It's like knowledge is power. The more I know, the better I can cope. Other children get very overwhelmed with a lot of details. They just want to know a base of information, or maybe they struggle even with that, and that's all they want. So I do think all children need that base of information, even if they don't really want it. They need to know the word cancer, they need to know there will be treatments, and they need to know how those treatments might make you feel or what they'll observe. But beyond that, think about the individual personalities and coping styles of your children, and the amount of information you give them can really be based on how they cope and what is helpful for them. Do consider informing your child's school so staff can support your child and contact you if you notice any academic or behavioral changes. Now, this can look very different from a young elementary school child to a teenager. The younger kids think it's the best thing in the world if the school counselor comes and pulls them out of class often, and they get to go play a game and talk. Often the younger kids just think that's great, whereas a teenager would be mortified if anyone approached them at school and, asked them to come talk or even acknowledge the parent's cancer. So as you communicate with your schools, think about what would be helpful for your child or teen, and talk to the staff about sort of meeting the child's needs based on their age and personality. I mentioned earlier about talking about as you share difficult information with your children to also share information that can help shore them up, can help them feel supported. One way to think about that is as you're thinking about what will change, which might be very difficult for your children, also think about what will stay the same. So this might be, I'm going to the hospital for my surgery on Thursday, and I'll be there until Monday. Grandma and Grandpa will come and stay at the house with you, but you can still sleep in your bed. You can still go to your soccer game, and you can still go to your friend's birthday party on Sunday. So as they're hearing that, there'll be this change, parents will be gone, they also know what will stay the same and what's predictable and what they can sort of count on. And that can help, again, build up their coping skills to help them with a difficult situation. The last bullet here is one of the hardest, and it is allow children to experience and express difficult feelings, sadness, anger, and fear. So, as parents, we want to protect our kids, and we don't want them to feel sad or angry or scared. But these are feelings they will have related to the cancer and related to many other situations in life. So we can better serve them if we teach them how to live with and cope with these feelings rather than trying to prevent these feelings. Another thing with young children is that sometimes when they have big feelings, they have inappropriate behavior. So they might hit somebody or kick somebody or stick their tongue out. If it's something small that you can ignore, sometimes just ignoring it is the way to go. But if you can't ignore it, to say something like, I can see you're having really big feelings right now, but it is not okay to hit your sister. I'm going to help you stop hitting, and if you need to, you can punch this pillow, but you can never hit a person. So you set limits around the behavior, but not about the need to express feelings. Parents often wonder, how do I know if my children need help? How do I know, if I should get them into counseling? So my first answer is I don't think counseling is ever a bad idea. I think children, teens, and adults benefit from that type of support when something difficult is going on. But I also understand that you're juggling, a lot of copays and a lot of appointments for yourself, and that might make it difficult to think about scheduling more and taking on more financial strain. So if you notice that your child or teen is experiencing any changes in mood or behavior that are so intense, so frequent, or so long-lasting that your child is unable to sleep, have fun, maintain peer relationships, participate in their normal activities, those types of things, then I would encourage you to go ahead and find a local therapist to meet with your child. Having said that, it's very normal and healthy for some of these changes to happen periodically. You tell your child you're being admitted for surgery on Thursday, and on Tuesday night and Wednesday night they really can't sleep. But by the time you get home next week, they're back sleeping normally, they're doing fine. Those aren't the changes I'm talking about. I'm talking about more persistent, ongoing changes where you notice your child or teen is just really struggling to be happy and participate in life. If your kids do not show any of these significant changes, but you just sense that they need support, then trust your intuition. You don't have to check boxes and say, oh yes, well I've checked off these boxes, they do need help. Trust your intuition as a parent and just go ahead and schedule an appointment with a therapist for your child or teen so they can get support outside the home. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Jean. That was just a great amount of information and wonderful overview of such a difficult and important topic. So thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Shelby.
For additional information, thank you. For additional information on this topic and other topics, please visit our website at www.melanoma.org or email us at education@melanoma.org. This now concludes our webinar.